This semester, we were given the book Where River Turns to Sky, written by Greg Cleaner. First off, we'd like to start out by talking about the setting. Our book is a touching tale set in the state of Oregon. Our main character, George, actually leaves his family farm in the hills of the countryside for a small neighboring town 13 miles away called Looking Glass. At this time, we do not believe there's any indication for the time period the story actually took place. Now for an overview of the characters. The first of which is George Castor. He is an 80-year-old farmer whose wife and son have already died. His dear friend has just passed away, and he is taking a journey. He randomly invites one of the other characters into his home and into his heart, and that's where our story really begins. The other character from which we get perspective is Clara Paulson. She is a 73-year-old woman who is unable to speak and is limited in her movements due to a stroke. She is the third person to move into the Hogan house and considers her roommates to be like brothers and sisters. She thinks of George often, and we get to see the second side of the house from her eyes. Moving on to Grace. She is a very old woman who spends a lot of time with George. She is the first person to actually move into the house when she shows up on Thanksgiving Day. Grace also offers to invite more people into this home. She helps take care of Clara and is constantly sharing her wisdom and oftentimes quirkiness with the rest of the house. Now the rest of the characters are recruited from a nursing home called the Gardens, the first of which is Bert. He enjoys taxidermy and his car, Gerda, and it became good buddies with George and the rest of the others. He is another person who adds a lot of quirkiness to the home. Then there's Emma and Fred. They are a couple and quite odd at that. Emma is overweight and oftentimes complaining. She spends most of her time tucked away in her room and is either crying or singing or listening to the television. She plays the role of the difficult one of the house and seems to be more of a child than anything else. Fred is Emma's husband. He's a short old man who likes to be dressed up in bow ties. He's kind of the level-headed one, and as you move on through the book, you get to understand a little bit more about the relationship and why he is the way he is. Miss Beasley is the old lady who lives down the street from the Hogan house. At first, she starts off as very unkind. We're unaware. She's the nosy neighbor who sometimes causes problems, even expressing her concerns to the entire town through the newspaper. She tries to keep herself separate from the Hogan house, but as time remains, she actually has a closer relationship with not only the people in the home, but the house itself. Ralph is the deceased friend of George. He is actually the one who spurs on this journey that George takes. We wouldn't really have this book if it wasn't for George and Ralph's relationship. They were so close throughout the majority of their life that you can tell it's affected George deeply. Now, let's talk about the storyline a little. Where the River Turns to Sky is a beautiful story of a lonely, elderly man who loses his dear friend Ralph and his son. In his grieving, he realizes he needs to do something spectacular in his last few years, not only for himself, but for the older people around him too. He really has a deep desire, not to have anyone left alone, especially towards the end of his life, for the fear that they may pass away without anyone around them. In the spur of a moment planning, George decides to purchase a mansion and puts an ad in the local paper welcoming anyone into his home for good food and good company. Grace is the first one to take George up on this invitation. Together they find a way to form a complete group of 6: George, Grace, Clara, Bert, Fred, and Emma. all spontaneously ready to spend the rest of their lives with one another, however short that may be. Beautifully, they come together like a mixed-matched family, all learning and loving one another in this mansion. All of them are traveling down the river in their own way. Some themes we would like to discuss in this book are the community between the characters in the house, the family roles of the characters. Even though they're all the same age, they form a unit that expresses certain roles that we would expect from a traditional family. The repetition of the characters' actions and what that means, how life is a circle, and how they express that throughout this book. And finally, the disregard for stereotypes. This entire book is about not living like an elderly person, not about living, not like they're going to die, but like they have the rest of their lives ahead of them. Everyone included in this presentation is Rachel, Jessica, Cassie, and Jessica. Thanks for your time, and I hope you are interested in reading this book.